The Honourable Opposition Leader.
The crime, Mr. Speaker. He unleashed the car theft crisis by bringing in house arrest and bail, not jail, for repeat career car thieves, and by allowing our ports to become sieves where our cars are stolen from, so much so that we're now becoming world famous for the Prime Minister's failures. The Ghana Economic and Organized Crime Office says we are in possession of stolen vehicles. The victims, it's all in Canada. No Canadian agency has approached us directly or made a formal complaint. Will he take the money from the back office bureaucrats and consultants and put it into frontline law enforcement to protect our cars?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition likes to make base political accusations. He likes to talk about C5 and C75 as the reason there is auto theft in this country. The reality is C5 is the bill that keeps mandatory minimum penalties for car theft on the books, and C75 is the bill that raises the maximum penalty on car theft. We've continued to step up in terms of keeping Canadians safe. We will continue to invest in the CBSA and in the resources necessary to counter these challenges. We will keep working based on facts and evidence, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Well, here are the actual facts. Let's go through them. C5 keeps mandatory prison sentences. Mr. Speaker, they were already in place, put there by the previous Conservative government. They weren't created by C5. What C5 did is it brought in house arrest for career car thieves so they can watch Netflix or perhaps play Grand Theft Auto in their living room and then go out onto the street and steal another car whenever they want. Will he follow my common sense plan to end house arrest for career car thieves?
Yeah. The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, in the Leader of the Opposition's simplistic worldview, someone sitting on their couch at home playing video games goes out and steals an Escalade. That's not what happens, Mr. Speaker. Organized crime is directly involved in the massive spike in auto thefts in this country. That's why what we're stepping up on in investment in anti-organized crime, investments against money laundering that party voted against, investments in more powers and more resources for Ontario to counter auto theft, and indeed more resources for the CBSA that they cut when they last left office will continue to be there.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, actually, people do steal cars when they're on house arrest because all they have to do is open the door and walk out and steal the car. Then there's his bail policy, which allowed the same 40 offenders to be arrested 6,000 times in Vancouver in a year, many of them car thieves. So, will he accept my common sense plan to get rid of house arrest and bring in jail, not bail, for career car thieves? Yes or no?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, in all the questions the Leader of the Opposition asked about car theft, he hasn't once mentioned organized crime, which is the cause of car theft in this country right now. And that's why perhaps he's not mentioning it, because when we brought forward measures to counter organized crime and money laundering, the Conservative Party voted against them. We moved forward with more resources for Ontario, $121 million to counter organized crime and car theft. The Conservative Party voted against. Mr. Speaker, we will continue to anchor ourselves in facts and data and deliver on keeping Canadians safe.
Hear, hear. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, he wants facts. Here's another fact. Extortions are up 218% since he took office. Right. Why? Because he got rid of mandatory jail time for extortion with a weapon. So now he allows extortionists to go around with guns, harassing small business owners in Brampton, in Surrey, in Calgary, and Edmonton, where horror stories are unfolding. Will he agree to our common sense plan to reverse catch and release so that Canadians are safe from extortion?
Yeah. The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
First of all, Mr. Speaker, the situation faced by far too many people across this country around extortion from organized crime is unacceptable, and that is why we are taking action directly with the RCMP and local police forces to counter it. But once again, we see Conservatives falling into the same far-right American trap in their approach on crime that doesn't work, that doesn't keep Canadians safe, that it sounds good in sound bites and attacks, but doesn't actually deliver safer communities. It's like their opposition to gun control and their desire to put assault-style weapons back on the streets. They don't keep Canadians safe. The work we does.
So I'd like to, colleagues, before you saw a hesitation in the previous round when the speaker was a little confused as to who was going to be speaking next. As it turns out, we had deprived the Leader of the Opposition a question. I don't know if the Leader of the Opposition wants it now or would he like it in the next round? He'll take it right now. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, let's talk about the cold, hard facts. There were 2/3 less cases of extortion in the last year of the common sense Conservative government than there are today. In the 10 years we were in office, the number of car thefts fell by half. And that was because we targeted the worst offenders, kept them in prison, we secured our ports, and stopped organized crime. The Prime Minister has only multiplied crime with his catch and release policies. Will he follow the evidence and reinstate a common sense criminal justice?
I hate to interrupt the honourable member, and I don't know if it was picked up on the mics, but I did pick up some language that was unparliamentary, and I'll ask all members to please watch themselves. The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, what we hear from the Leader of the Opposition is under the previous Conservative government, everything was perfect, and what he is proposing to do is to make Canada great again. That is not what Canadians want. He is pining for a nostalgia that, quite frankly, Canadians do not feel. They remember what he did as part of Stephen Harper's failed housing minister. He remembers the people who the rights of Indigenous peoples violated, the ignoring of environmental responsibilities, and the lack of an environmental and economic plan for the future. We're going to continue.
The honourable member from Port Moody, Coquitlam.
Canadians with disabilities are being treated unfairly by big airlines, and the Liberal solution? Another gentleman's meeting with a CEO who only cares about his own bottom line. This is a slap in the face to passengers who've had their human rights violated, having to drag themselves off a plane. Like with the greedy grocery CEOs, the Liberals are just letting Air Canada get away with it. Will the Prime Minister get serious about holding these CEOs to account to protect Canadians?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we will continue to be there to protect vulnerable Canadians. We'll continue to make sure that areas of federal jurisdiction like airlines continue to meet all their responsibilities and obligations toward Canadians. This is something we take extraordinarily seriously, and we will continue to ensure that all airlines are respecting Canadians and their rights.
The honourable member from Nunavut.
The Liberals are skirting their responsibility by underfunding the non-insured health benefits that provides dental care, eye care, mental health, and medical travel for Nunavut. Their actions are forcing Nunavut to divert funds to this program instead of their own health priorities. The Liberals need to step up. Their failure to live up to their responsibilities to Nunavut is unacceptable. Will the Prime Minister commit to its obligations to ensure Nunavut have the health care they are owed?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, just a few weeks ago, I was in Iqaluit to talk to the Premier of Nunavut, PJ Ahiaguk, to talk about how we can continue to be partners as we move forward and ensure the strength and opportunities for all Nunavummiut. This is what we're continuing to do, whether it was celebrating the historic devolution agreement that we made possible, or looking at further supports, including non-insured health benefits. We will continue to be there for the people of Nunavut. We will continue to be there for people of the North.
Hear, hear. The honourable member from Kitchener-Conestoga.
Mr. Speaker, last week the government announced that eligible Canadians residents aged 72 and older can now apply for a Canada dental plan. Over 500,000 applicants have been approved for the Canadian Dental Care Program, making dental care more affordable and accessible. This is great news for seniors in Kitchener-Conestoga and across Canada, as more and more seniors have access to affordable dental care. Can the Prime Minister please update us on the Canadian Dental Care Plan that will help seniors smile and be an important part of overall health?
The Right Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I know the member for Kitchener-Conestoga is passionate about ensuring seniors and kids get access to dental care. I'm happy to announce that in the first few weeks, over 600,000 seniors have successfully signed up for the Canadian Dental Care Plan. While the Conservative Party voted against funding dental care to those who need it most, we want to reassure Canadian seniors that on this side of the House, we will always have their backs, we'll fight for them, and we'll make sure that that leader never cuts essential supports to seniors.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
After 8 years, the Prime Minister is not worth the cost of housing, which has doubled since he promised to lower it. Now we have a brand new phenomenon of the middle-class homeless. In fact, according to the Executive Director of the Royal Canadian Legion of Nova Scotia, members of the Canadian Forces are now forced to live in tents, in cars, and to couch surf. There are 30 homeless encampments in Halifax after 8 years of this Prime Minister. But why would the Prime Minister then plan to go ahead with a $450 a year rent increase to our armed forces members who are already forced to live in tents?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, military members and their families are a priority, and we're taking steps to ensure that they are supported. We're investing $445 million over the coming years to tackle the supply of military housing. And when the Conservatives had an opportunity to support our military personnel, they chose not to. The Conservatives stood up in this House and voted against supporting our men and women in uniform just last December.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, that is an outrageous non-response to the men and women who put their lives on the line for this country. He rewards them with a tent or a couch in someone else's basement to sleep in. After 8 years of this Prime Minister, there's a 177% increase in Bagotville and a 261% increase in the wait line for military housing. And now he plans a $450 rent increase on the people who protect our country. Shouldn't he be ashamed of himself?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we'll take no lessons from the Conservatives who nickel and dimed our military service members and veterans through 9 years of their time in office, and even dropped military funding to below 1% of GDP, Mr. Speaker. We will continue to step up, including with $445 million for military housing in the coming years, as we continue to honor and support the women and men who serve our country with their lives.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Honors them with a tent to live in. He honors them with a $450 increase in their rent. Before this Prime Minister, we didn't have masses of military members living in tent cities, Mr. Speaker. They could put a roof overhead. In fact, we didn't have 30 tent cities in Halifax. We didn't have 2 million people lined up at food banks in lines that are reminiscent of the Great Depression. We didn't have young people forced to wait till they're age 40 to get a home. The good news is life was not like this before this Prime Minister, and it won't be like this after he's gone.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Why doesn't he just say it straight out, Mr. Speaker? He's planning to make Canada great again. The reality is, Mr. Speaker, Canada is great. Canada is the best country in the world. And yes, there are challenges, and that's why we're stepping up to invest, whether it's $445 million for military housing, whether it's stepping up with dental care for vulnerable seniors or youth, whether it's cutting child care fees in half, Mr. Speaker, whether it's continuing to step up for vulnerable youth. We are going to be there for Canadians while he proposes cuts to services, cuts to programs, and cuts to the supports that Canadians need.